The stars looked different near the edge of Valtheran space. They burned brighter here, or perhaps it was just the way the massive Imperial flagship caught their light. Emperor Kavik stood on the bridge of his vessel, hands clasped behind his back, watching the view screen with mild interest. His daughter, Princess Elara, stood beside him, her golden eyes fixed on the small dot that appeared on their sensors. "A human vessel," General Throm announced, his voice carrying across the bridge. "Single craft, small, appears to be a reconnaissance ship." Elara leaned forward. She had heard whispers about humans recently. A new species that had emerged in a distant sector, barely worth mentioning in the grand scheme of galactic politics. The Valtheran Empire had conquered 47 species over 10,000 years. What was one more? "Surround it," Kavik ordered casually. "Let us see what these newcomers want in our territory." Within minutes, 200 Valtheran warships materialized from faster-than-light travel, forming a perfect sphere around the lone human craft. Each warship was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The human vessel looked like a toy by comparison, barely larger than a personal shuttle. Elara expected panic. She expected desperate communications, pleas for mercy, perhaps an attempt to flee. Instead, the human ship simply stopped moving and broadcast a message on standard galactic frequencies. "This is Scout Team 7 of the Human Exploratory Service," a calm male voice said. "We mean no harm and request peaceful passage through this region. We were not aware this space was claimed. Our apologies for the intrusion." Throm scoffed. "They apologize? As if they have a choice." Kavik raised a hand for silence. "Open a channel. Let me see them." The view screen flickered and 2 humans appeared. The male was lean and dark-haired, wearing a simple gray uniform with minimal decoration. His name tag read Deho. Beside him sat a female, with her hair pulled back in a practical style, her uniform identical to his. Her name tag said Hannah. It looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. Elara felt a twinge of disappointment. She had hoped for something more interesting than these plain creatures who barely filled their small cockpit. "I am Emperor Kavik of the Valtheran Empire," her father said, his voice resonating with authority. "You have entered our space without permission. This is a violation of Imperial law." Dai-Ho nodded slowly. "We understand, Your Majesty. We're prepared to leave immediately if that's your wish. We're just explorers, mapping this region of space. We didn't mean to cause any trouble." "Explorers," Elara repeated, unable to hide her skepticism. "Just the 2 of you? In that tiny ship?" Hannah smiled slightly. "There are actually 4 of us on board, Princess. 2 more are in the back, running the science equipment. We're a standard scout team." "Standard," Throm muttered. "What kind of civilization sends scouts in ships that small? Do you have no proper military vessels?" "We have defensive ships," Dao said carefully. "But we're not a military expedition. We're scientists, really. We study planets, collect data, meet new species when we can. It's peaceful work." Kavik exchanged a glance with his daughter. Peaceful work. The Valtheran Empire had not known peace in 3,000 years. War was constant, necessary, the natural state of the universe. Empires expanded or they died. Everyone knew this truth. "Bring them aboard," Elara said suddenly. "I want to speak with them face to face." Her father raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Very well. Humans, you will transport to our flagship for diplomatic negotiations. Come unarmed and prepare to answer questions about your people. We have standard sidearms," Deho said. "Required equipment for scout teams. We can leave them on our ship if you prefer." "Keep them," Kavik said with amusement. "I doubt they pose any threat here. The transport took only moments." Valtheran technology was far superior to anything these humans possessed, or so everyone on the bridge believed. When the two humans materialized in the designated bay, Alara walked down to meet them with Thrawn and a security detail of 20 soldiers. Up close, the humans looked even less impressive. Jiho stood perhaps average height for his species, with calm brown eyes that took in everything without apparent concern. Hana was slightly shorter, her expression friendly but reserved. Neither of them seemed frightened, despite being surrounded by armed guards in the heart of an Imperial warship. "Welcome aboard," Ilara said, keeping her voice neutral. "I hope you understand the seriousness of your situation." "We do," Dael replied. "And we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us, rather than simply destroying our ship. That shows restraint and wisdom." Thrawn bristled at the implied suggestion that the Valtheran Empire needed praise for basic diplomacy. But Ilara held up a hand to forestall his outburst. "Tell me about your people," she said as they walked through the corridors toward the interrogation rooms. "How large is your civilization?" "We have about 12 billion humans spread across our home system, and a few nearby colonies," Hada answered. "Earth is our homeworld, with major settlements on Mars and Europa. We've been exploring beyond our system for about 70 years now." 12 billion, Ilara repeated. The Valtheran Empire alone had 3 trillion citizens across 600 worlds. "And in 70 years of space travel, you've established only a few colonies?" "We prefer to grow slowly," Deo said. "Make sure each colony is sustainable and healthy before moving on. Quality over quantity, we like to say." They entered a large room with a table and chairs. The furniture was sized for Valther, making the humans look even smaller as they sat down. Guards positioned themselves at every exit. Monitors lined the walls, recording everything. Alara took her seat across from them, with Thrawn standing at her shoulder like a dark shadow. She studied the humans carefully, looking for signs of deception or hidden strength. She found neither. They simply sat there, waiting patiently, their hands resting on the table in plain view. "Your ship," Thrawn said abruptly. "It has faster-than-light capability, but the design is crude. You have energy weapons, but they're low-powered. Your shields wouldn't stop a single shot from our smallest fighter craft. How do you expect to survive in this galaxy?" Daho smiled, but there was something sad in it. "We don't plan on getting shot at, General. We're not here to fight anyone. We just want to learn, to discover, to meet new people and understand the universe better." "Naive," Thrawn declared. "The galaxy doesn't care about your peaceful intentions. The strong dominate the weak. That's the law of existence." "Maybe," Hana said quietly. "But we've found that most conflicts can be avoided with good communication and mutual respect. We'd rather talk than fight." Ilara found herself increasingly puzzled by these creatures. They spoke of peace and exploration as if warfare was optional, as if empires could simply choose not to expand. It went against everything she had ever known, everything the Valtheran Empire represented. Yet there was something in their eyes, something she couldn't quite identify. It wasn't fear, despite their obvious vulnerability. It wasn't arrogance, despite their claims of peaceful intention. It was something else entirely, something that made her deeply uncomfortable without understanding why. "We'll continue this conversation," she said finally. "You'll remain here as our guests until I'm satisfied I understand your people. I want to know everything about human civilization, your technology, your government, your history, everything." Daiho and Hana exchanged a brief look, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then Daiho nodded. "We'll answer your questions, Princess," he said. "But I should warn you that human history is complicated. Some of it might be difficult to hear." Ilara laughed. "I doubt anything you tell me will shock the heir to an empire built on 10,000 years of conquest." Neither human responded to that. They simply sat there in silence, waiting for the interrogation to begin. While somewhere deep in Ilara's mind, a small voice whispered that perhaps she should have paid more attention to that warning. The interrogation began with simple questions. Ilara wanted to understand the basics of human civilization before digging deeper. She started with population, resources, territorial claims, all standard information that any empire would gather about a potential rival or conquest target. Daiho answered everything with the same calm, measured tone. He described Earth as a blue and green world, mostly water with 7 continents. He explained how humans had nearly destroyed themselves with pollution and war, before finally unifying under a single planetary government. He talked about the colonies on Mars, the research stations on Europa, the small outposts scattered across their home system. You unified your entire species under one government? Thrawn interrupted. How? Through conquest? Through democracy, Hana said. It took about 50 years of negotiation and compromise, but eventually, every nation on Earth agreed to join the United Earth Council. Nobody was forced. Impossible, Thrawn declared. Species don't unify without force. There are always holdouts, always those who refuse to submit. There were holdouts at first, Daiho admitted. But when people saw the benefits of working together, pooling resources, ending the constant cycle of conflict, most chose to join voluntarily. The last few nations came aboard when they realized isolation would leave them behind. Ilara found this hard to believe, but she moved on. She asked about their military, expecting to finally hear about fleets and armies that would make sense of their presence in space. What she heard instead baffled her. The peacekeeping force has about 5 million active personnel, Daiho said. They're spread across all our territories, mostly doing rescue operations, disaster relief, and basic security. We haven't had a major conflict in almost 200 years. The room went silent. Ilara stared at the human, certain she had misheard. 5 million? Total? That's correct. To defend 12 billion people across multiple worlds? We don't really need defending, Hana said with a shrug. We're not at war with anyone. The peacekeeping force exists mainly to help people, not fight enemies. Thrawn leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the table. Every civilization has enemies. Every species fights for resources, territory, survival. You're telling me humanity has none of this? We have disagreements sometimes, Daiho said. Political debates, economic competition, that sort of thing. But we settle those through discussion and compromise. Violence is rarely necessary. Rarely? Ilara caught the word. But sometimes it is necessary? Daiho hesitated for just a moment. Sometimes, when all other options are exhausted. But it's been a long time since we reached that point. Hana pulled out a small device and projected holographic images above the table. Ilara watched as scenes of human cities appeared, gleaming towers of glass and metal, parks filled with trees and children playing, massive libraries and universities, art galleries and museums. Everything looked peaceful, prosperous, almost disturbingly calm. This is New Seoul, Hana explained, highlighting one city. Population 8 million. No military presence at all, just local police for basic law enforcement. This is typical of our major cities. No military presence, Thrawn repeated slowly. What if you're attacked? By whom? Daiho asked reasonably. We haven't encountered any hostile species yet. Before today, we'd only met 2 other civilizations, both of them peaceful traders. We had no reason to expect trouble. Ilara felt a strange chill run down her spine. These humans were either the most naive creatures in the galaxy, or they were hiding something significant. She decided to press harder. General Thrawn, tell our guests about the Valthran Empire's current military situation. Thrawn straightened with pride. We are currently engaged in active conflicts on 17 fronts. 3 species are being subjugated and integrated into the Empire, adding approximately 200 billion new citizens to our population. We are defending our territory from 2 rival empires who seek to claim our resources. We maintain a standing military force of 800 billion soldiers across all branches of service. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Our smallest scout fleet has more personnel than your entire military. A single one of our battle groups could conquer your entire civilization before your peacekeeping force could even mobilize. Elara watched the humans carefully, expecting fear or at least respect for the might they faced. Instead, Daiho and Hana exchanged another one of those looks, that silent communication that seemed so common between them. "That sounds exhausting," Hana said quietly. "What?" Thrawn sputtered. 17 wars at once, she continued. "That must take enormous resources. How do you maintain your infrastructure, your civilian population's quality of life, when so much is dedicated to constant warfare?" "We are an empire," Thrawn said stiffly. "Warfare is our nature. We have conquered, and we will continue to conquer. That is how we have survived for 10,000 years. But at what cost?" Daiho asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice, not judgment. "How many of your people die each year in these conflicts? How much of your economy goes to military production instead of research, art, education, quality of life improvements?" Elara found herself uncomfortable with these questions. She had never really considered the cost of the Empire's endless expansion. It was simply the way things were, the way things had always been. The Valthran people were warriors, conquerors. They didn't question it. "We do what is necessary to survive," she said firmly. "In a hostile galaxy, peace is weakness. Compassion is vulnerability. Only the strong endure. Is the galaxy hostile?" Hana asked. "Or do we make it hostile by assuming everyone is an enemy?" "That's philosophical nonsense," Thrawn snapped. "The reality is simple. Resources are finite. Territory is limited. Species compete for both. The strong take what they need. The weak submit or die. Resources aren't that finite anymore," Daiho said. "We can synthesize most materials we need. We can terraform planets, build habitats in space, create almost anything given enough energy and time. The old resource scarcity model doesn't really apply at our technology level." "Then you fight for territory," Thrawn insisted. "Why?" "Space is infinite. There are billions of stars out there, most of them unclaimed. We could explore for 1,000 years and never run out of new worlds to study." Elara stood abruptly, frustrated by the circular conversation. These humans made no sense. They had technology, they had resources, they had billions of citizens, yet they chose not to expand, not to conquer, not to dominate. It violated every principle she had ever learned about how civilizations operated. "I want to see your ship's database," she said. "Your historical records. I need to understand where you came from, how you developed this strange philosophy of yours." Daiho looked uncertain. "Our history is long and complicated, Princess. Some of it is not pleasant. I've studied the histories of 47 conquered species," Elara said coldly. "I doubt yours will be worse." "Don't be so sure," Hana muttered, but she accessed her handheld device and began the data transfer. "We're sending you access to our historical archives now. Everything is there, unedited and complete. But please understand that humanity has changed significantly over the past few centuries. Our past doesn't define our present." "We'll see about that," Thrawn said, already moving to a console to begin reviewing the data. As the files began downloading, Elara noticed something strange. The humans looked sad, almost melancholic. Daiho stared at the table, his jaw tight. Hana had her arms crossed, her usual friendly expression replaced with something harder. "You're not proud of your history," Alara observed. "No," Deho said simply. "We're not. But we learned from it. That's what matters." "Learned what?" He met her eyes, and for the first time, Alara saw something deep and ancient in that gaze. Something that made her want to step back, even though he hadn't moved. "We learned what we're capable of when we're afraid," Deho said quietly. "And we decided never to be that afraid again." Before Alara could ask what that meant, Throm made a choking sound at his console. He was staring at the screen, his face pale despite his naturally dark complexion. "Princess," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I think you need to see this." Alara walked over to the console and looked at the screen. She saw dates, casualty figures, weapon descriptions. Her eyes widened as she read, then widened further. The numbers kept growing, the descriptions becoming more horrific. "This can't be right," she whispered. "This says in just 1 century, you fought 2 wars that killed over 100 million of your own species. And this weapon, this nuclear bomb, it says you built thousands of them, each capable of destroying entire cities." "That's correct," Hana said from behind her. "We told you. Our history is complicated." Alara turned back to face the humans, and for the first time since they had arrived, she felt a flutter of real fear in her chest. "You did this to yourselves?" she asked. "Your own people?" "Yes," Deho said. "We were very good at killing each other. For a very long time. Too good." And suddenly, Alara understood why these peaceful explorers made her so uncomfortable. They weren't weak. They weren't naive. They were something far more terrifying. They were dangerous creatures, pretending to be harmless. The interrogation continued for hours. General Throm had become obsessed with the human historical records, scrolling through centuries of warfare and conflict with growing disbelief. Alara watched him work while asking the humans more questions, trying to reconcile what she was reading with the calm, peaceful people sitting across from her. "These world wars," she said, pointing to the data. "You fought them with primitive technology. Guns that fired metal projectiles. Bombs that needed to be physically dropped from aircraft. Yet you still managed to kill millions. We're very creative when it comes to killing," Deho said, and there was no pride in his voice, only a kind of tired acceptance. "Humans have always been good at finding efficient ways to destroy things." "But you stopped," Alara pressed. "The records show your last major conflict ended 200 years ago. What changed?" "We got tired," Hana said simply. "Tired of burying our children. Tired of seeing cities burn. Tired of living in fear. So we chose differently." "Chose?" Thrawn scoffed, not looking up from his console. "As if it's that simple." "It wasn't simple at all," Deho admitted. "It took generations. But we decided that survival required cooperation instead of competition. We dedicated ourselves to building instead of destroying. It's been working so far." Alara stood and paced the room, her mind racing. The more she learned about humans, the less sense they made. By all logic, aye. Species this violent should have conquered half the galaxy by now. Instead, they sent out tiny scout ships with 4-person crews to peacefully explore. "General," she said suddenly, "I want to test something." Thrawn looked up, understanding her intent immediately. A cruel smile crossed his face. "The combat assessment?" "Yes. If these humans claim to be peaceful, let's see how they react to physical confrontation." Deho tensed slightly. "That's not necessary, Princess. We've told you everything we know." "Humor me," Alara said. She gestured to 3 of her guards, each one a trained warrior, standing over 7 feet tall. "A simple sparring exercise. My soldiers need to maintain their readiness. You'll participate to demonstrate human combat capability. We're scouts, not soldiers, Hana protested. We don't train for combat. Then this should be over quickly, Thrawn said, clearly enjoying the situation. Don't worry. My men will be gentle, probably. The 3 Valthuran warriors stepped forward, cracking their knuckles. They towered over the humans, each one outweighing Daeho by at least 100 pounds of pure muscle. The leader, a scarred veteran named Cross, grinned down at the humans. Nothing personal, Cross said. Just following orders. He reached out to grab Hana by the arm, not gently. The other 2 guards moved to flank them, cutting off any escape route. It was meant to be intimidating, overwhelming, a demonstration of Valthuran superiority. What happened next took less than 4 seconds. Daeho moved. There was no warning, no visible preparation. One moment he was sitting at the table, the next he was a blur of motion. His hand struck Cross's wrist with surgical precision, breaking the grip on Hana. He pivoted, using Cross's own momentum, to throw the massive warrior into one of his companions. Both went down hard. The 3rd guard lunged forward, but Daeho was already there, inside his reach. An elbow to the solar plexus folded the warrior in half. A sweep of the leg sent him crashing to the floor beside his friends. 4 seconds. 3 trained Valthuran warriors, each one a combat specialist, laying on the ground groaning. And Daeho standing there, breathing calmly, not even having drawn his sidearm. The room went absolutely silent. Elara stared, her mouth slightly open. Thrawn had frozen at his console, his expression shocked. The remaining guards had their weapons half drawn, uncertain whether to intervene. Hana quickly moved to help the fallen guards to their feet, apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry. That shouldn't have happened. Are you hurt? Daeho, I told you to stay calm. They grabbed you, Daeho said, and there was steel in his voice now. I don't react well to that. Cross accepted Hana's help standing up, rubbing his wrist where Daeho had struck him. What was that? He gasped. That technique, that speed. You moved like a special forces operative. I'm a scout, Daeho said, his expression returning to its usual calm. Just a scout. No, Elara said, finding her voice. That was not scout training. That was combat experience. Real combat experience. Daeho looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Hana, who gave a small nod. It's standard education, he said finally. All human children receive basic combat training from age 6 through 18. It's part of our curriculum, like mathematics or literature. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Your children? Thrawn whispered. You teach your children to fight like that? It's mostly sports now, Hana said quickly. Wrestling, martial arts, tactical thinking exercises. We frame it as physical education and self-defense. Most humans never use it beyond school competitions. But you learn to disable 3 armed opponents in 4 seconds as a child? Elara demanded. As a teenager, technically, Daeho corrected. And to be fair, I didn't expect them to go down that easily. Valthuran physiology must be different from human. I was actually holding back quite a bit. Holding back. He had been holding back. Thrawn pulled up more historical records, his hands shaking slightly. These martial arts you mention, they're all over your history. Thousands of different fighting styles, developed over millennia. Weapons training. Hand-to-hand combat. Military strategy. You've been teaching your entire population how to fight for your entire existence. We had to, Hana said defensively. Earth was a dangerous place for most of our history. Different nations, different tribes, all competing for limited resources. Everyone needed to know how to defend themselves. And when you unified, Elara said slowly, understanding dawning, when you stopped fighting each other, you didn't lose that knowledge. You just changed how you used it. We redirected it, Daiho agreed. Combat sports, self-defense training, discipline and focus exercises. The skills are still there. We just apply them differently now. Alara walked to the window, staring out at the stars. Her mind was reeling. She thought about the numbers. 12 billion humans, all of them with basic combat training from childhood. All of them carrying that legacy of violence, that genetic memory of warfare. The peacekeeping force, she said without turning around. 5 million personnel. That's not your military, is it? No, Daiho admitted quietly. That's our police force, essentially. We don't have a standing military anymore. We don't need one. Because everyone is a soldier, Thrawn said, and it wasn't a question. Because everyone could be a soldier if they needed to be, Hana corrected. But they don't need to be. We chose peace. You chose peace because you're all weapons waiting to be loaded, Alara said, finally understanding the truth. Your civilization is an army pretending to be explorers. That's not fair, Hana protested. We're genuinely peaceful. We haven't fought anyone in 2 centuries. We came out here to learn, to discover, to make friends. But if someone threatened you, Thrawn said, if someone attacked your colonies or your homeworld, what would happen? Daiho's expression became very still. Please don't answer the question, Alara commanded. We have protocols, Daiho said carefully. The species survival compact. It's a treaty every human signs when they come of age. If humanity faces existential threat, if Earth or our colonies are in danger of destruction, the treaty activates. And then what? Then everyone mobilizes, Hana said quietly. Every able-bodied human becomes part of the defense. 12 billion people, all with combat training, all with the memory of what we're capable of when we're desperate. It's never been activated. We pray it never will be. Alara turned back to face them, and she saw the truth in their eyes. These weren't peaceful explorers. These were warriors who had chosen to put down their weapons. These were apex predators who had decided to become vegetarians, but they could go back. If threatened, if pushed, if given no other choice, they could become what they used to be. You're terrifying, she said softly. Do you understand that? Your entire species is terrifying. We know, Daiho said, and he sounded genuinely sad. That's why we left. That's why we explore. We're trying to be better than what we were. We're trying to prove we can be more than just killers. Cross had been standing silently, still rubbing his wrist. Now he spoke up, his voice respectful. That move you used on me. Where did you learn it? School, Daiho said with a slight smile. 10th grade martial arts class. My instructor was a former peacekeeping force trainer. He taught us the basics. Basics, Cross repeated hollowly. You disabled 3 warriors with basics. I'm really not that good, Daiho insisted. There are millions of humans who could do the same thing. It's just standard training. And that, Alara realized with growing horror, was the most frightening thing of all. Princess Alara could not sleep. It had been 6 hours since the combat demonstration, and she had spent every moment since then reading human history. The database was enormous, spanning hundreds of thousands of years from primitive tool use to space exploration. But it was the recent history that kept her awake. The last few thousand years that showed exactly what humanity was capable of. She sat in her private quarters, holographic displays floating around her, each one showing a different aspect of human warfare. General Thrawn sat across from her, equally absorbed. Neither had eaten or rested. They couldn't look away. The siege of Carthage, Thrawn read aloud. They surrounded the city for 3 years, starving the population. When they finally broke through, they killed or enslaved everyone inside, then salted the earth so nothing would grow there again. This was over 2,000 years ago, when humans were still confined to one planet. They did it to each other, Ilara whispered. They laid siege to their own species' cities. She pulled up another file. The Mongol Empire. They conquered most of their known world in less than a century. Killed an estimated 40 million people, about 11% of their global population at the time. They built pyramids from the skulls of their enemies. Look at this, Thrawn said, his voice shaking. The 30 Years' War. A third of Central Europe's population died. The Napoleonic Wars, the American Civil War, the Taiping Rebellion, 50 million dead. And that's all before the industrialized warfare. Ilara scrolled forward. The First World War. They called it the Great War because they thought nothing could be worse. Trench warfare, chemical weapons, machine guns. 20 million dead in 4 years. Then they did it again, Thrawn said, pulling up more records. 20 years later, the Second World War. 80 million dead. They developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Nuclear bombs. They built them, tested them, and actually used them on each other. The hologram showed footage from something called Hiroshima. Ilara watched a mushroom cloud rise over a city, watched the destruction spread in a perfect circle, watched buildings vaporize, and people turn to shadows on the pavement. She felt sick. They used it twice, she said, checking the records. They destroyed 2 cities with nuclear weapons. Then they kept building more. Thousands of them. Enough to render their entire planet uninhabitable. And they almost did, Thrawn added, reading another file. This Cold War period, they came within minutes of launching a full nuclear exchange multiple times. Only individual humans making the choice not to push the button saved their species from extinction. Ilara stood and paced her quarters. The more she read, the less she understood how humanity had survived to reach the stars. They should have destroyed themselves. By every logical analysis, a species this violent, this creative in their destruction, should have gone extinct long ago. What changed? She asked. There has to be a turning point. Something that made them stop. Thrawn scrolled through the timeline. Here, the mid-21st century. They call it the unification period. Climate change was destroying their environment. Resources were running low. They had the technology to colonize other worlds, but were too busy fighting each other to use it properly. So they were forced to cooperate, Ilara said. Not exactly. They chose to cooperate before they were forced. Multiple crises happening at once, widespread recognition that they needed to change, and enough people deciding that peace was worth trying. He pulled up more records. They formed the United Earth Council, dismantled most of their nuclear weapons, created the peacekeeping force to replace standing armies, focused on terraforming Mars and developing sustainable colonies. It took 50 years, but they actually did it. Ilara read the records with amazement. They convinced every nation on Earth to give up sovereignty and join a single government. No force, no conquest, just negotiation and compromise. Because the alternative was extinction, Thrawn said. They knew what they were capable of. They'd seen the mushroom clouds, walked through the ashes of cities, counted the bodies in the millions. They chose survival over pride. But something bothered Ilara. She pulled up military records from the unification period. Look at this. When they created the peacekeeping force, they didn't forget how to fight. They preserved every military manual, every combat technique, every tactical doctrine. They stored it all in archives. Just in case, Thrawn said quietly. Just in case, Ilara agreed. They became peaceful, but they never became helpless. They remember exactly what they are. She accessed more recent files, looking at human education systems. The combat training Gay-Ho had mentioned was there, integrated into every school curriculum. Children learning martial arts alongside mathematics. Teenagers studying military strategy as part of history classes. Physical fitness requirements that included combat-applicable skills. They're teaching every generation how to be soldiers, she observed. But they frame it as education, culture, tradition. Most humans probably don't even realize they're being trained for war. Maybe that's the point, Throm suggested. Keep the skills alive without glorifying the violence. Remember how to fight without wanting to fight. Elara pulled up a simulation she had found in the files. Look at this. It's a war game scenario created by human strategic planners. They call it the species survival response. It models what would happen if humanity needed to mobilize for total war. She activated the simulation. Both she and Throm watched in growing horror as the program ran through countless scenarios. 12 billion humans, all combat trained, all coordinated through their advanced communication networks. The simulation showed them building weapons, organizing into military units, applying their industrial capacity to warfare. This can't be accurate, Throm said. No species can mobilize this efficiently. But the simulation continued. It showed human fleets using unconventional tactics, millions of small ships coordinated like a single organism. It showed planetary defenses that turned entire worlds into fortresses. It showed weapon systems that used physics in ways the Valthern Empire had never considered. They're not just thinking about defense, Elara realized. This simulation includes offensive capabilities. If they were threatened, they wouldn't just defend. They would strike back. One scenario caught her attention. A hostile force attacking Earth directly. The simulation showed humanity's response. Every ship redirected toward the homeworld. Every factory converted to military production. Every human armed and organized. The hostile force in the simulation was destroyed within months, hunted down and eliminated with ruthless efficiency. They would fight like cornered animals, Throm whispered. Desperate and vicious. No, Elara corrected. They would fight like humans have always fought. Coordinated, creative, willing to pay any price for survival. She found military doctrine files, strategies developed over centuries of warfare. Deep strike tactics. Asymmetric warfare. Psychological operations. Weapons of mass destruction held in reserve, but never forgotten. Humanity had learned every possible way to wage war and written it all down. This is why they explore, she said, understanding clicking into place. This is why they send out small scout teams instead of invasion fleets. They're proving to themselves that they can be different. They're trying to escape what they were. But they can never fully escape, Throm said. It's in their nature, in their history, in the way they train their children. They're always ready for war, even while pursuing peace. Elara pulled up population statistics. 12 billion humans. If even a fraction of them mobilized, they would outnumber the entire Valtheran military. And every single one of them had combat training from childhood. The peacekeeping force, she said suddenly. 5 million personnel. That's not a military. That's a cadre. A corps of professional soldiers who could train and organize everyone else if needed. A seed army, Throm agreed. Give them a few weeks and they could mobilize billions. She thought about Gay-Ho and Hana sitting in the interrogation room, patiently answering questions. Just scouts. Just explorers. But Gay-Ho had disabled 3 warriors in seconds, and he claimed he wasn't even particularly skilled by human standards. What have we done? She asked quietly. We surrounded their scout ship with 200 warships. We brought them aboard as prisoners. We tested them with combat. We showed them we might be a threat, Throm finished. And if they report back that the Valthern Empire is hostile, that we capture and test peaceful explorers, then what? Elara pulled up star charts. Their home system is here, 8 light years from our border. Close enough that they probably have dozens of scout teams in nearby space. If something happened to Scout Team 7, the others would notice. And they would investigate, Thrawn said. They would find out what we did. Then they would report back to Earth. And Earth would respond, Elara concluded. Not with diplomacy. Not with negotiation. They would respond the way humans have always responded to threats. They sat in silence, both of them staring at the historical records floating around them. Centuries of human warfare, millions of dead, species-wide trauma that had somehow been channeled into peaceful exploration. But the violence was still there, just under the surface, waiting. We need to tell the Emperor, Elara said finally. He needs to understand what these humans really are. What are they? Thrawn asked. Peaceful explorers or sleeping warriors? Elara thought about Deho's sad eyes when he talked about human history. She thought about the simulation showing 12 billion humans mobilizing for war. She thought about nuclear weapons and sieges and the sheer stubborn refusal to surrender that characterized every human conflict she had read about. Both, she said. They're both. And that's what makes them so dangerous. Emperor Kavik arrived at the interrogation room 12 hours after his daughter's request. He had spent that time reviewing the same historical records that had kept Elara and Thrawn awake all night. His expression was grave as he entered, flanked by his personal guard. Deho and Hana were still there, looking tired but patient. You've been very forthcoming with information, Kavik said without preamble. I appreciate your honesty. We have nothing to hide, Deho replied. We came here in peace. We'll leave in peace if you allow it. That's what troubles me, Kavik said, sitting across from them. Elara and Thrawn entered behind him, taking positions at his shoulders. I've read your history. I've seen what your species is capable of. Yet you sit here calmly, prisoners on a hostile ship, surrounded by an empire that could destroy your scout vessel with a single shot. You don't seem concerned. Should we be? Hana asked. Most species would be terrified. Most species probably didn't grow up learning about the Second World War, Deho said quietly. Fear is relative, Your Majesty. We've seen what real horror looks like. This is just a diplomatic misunderstanding. Kavik leaned forward. I want to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. If the Valtheran Empire decided to invade human territory, to conquer your colonies, and claim your resources, what would happen? Deho's expression became very serious. Please don't do that. That's not an answer. It's a request, Deho said. A sincere one. We don't want conflict with the Valtheran Empire or anyone else.